mind-boggling how little energy they use and how much we use here. I've spent a lot of time in America, sort of aware of it. So we're going to sort of see if there's a way of changing that approach. And I will now welcome onto the stage a lovely panel. And I'm going to start with Roger Atkins, who's just going to come up very quietly because he's a very shy man. He's not going to make this. There we go. He's very shy. And after him, Daveena Saranna, who works at Fully Charged, and Brad Rinehart from PLEMco. Brad, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. And after Brad is Nicholas Carter from Solar Installation Machines. So please welcome the panel onto the stage.
What have we got?
You've got a bit of a conundrum. Can you do a conundrum song for us, Roger? That's it, there we go, that's a conundrum.
My agent won't let me do any more than that. Well, you're my agent, aren't you?
I am, yes.
So, Nicholas, can I start with you? You live here?
I do.
You know what's going on? I mean, what is it? I'll just give you my impression, and we're really from the first time I came to America from the old country, I was blown away, I was impressed, I was blown off my feet by the enthusiasm, the expansiveness, the kind of optimism of American culture and American society, which meant everything could be bigger and better and faster and smarter. And that was incredibly invigorating from someone coming from a country that was a bit, you can't do that. You're not from the right class background. Don't try to change anything. So I was really thrilled by it. But that also included, let's just use vast amounts of energy to create the world that we live in. So, I mean, what's your attitude to that?
Maybe I should ask if people have seen the movie Who Killed the Electric Car? How many have seen that?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so all the people who haven't put their hands up, you have to promise me that when you go home, you're going to watch that movie. It's available on a certain streaming service. It's a regular movie that's out there. And you'll see Chelsea Sexton, for those people who've seen Chelsea over the last day or two, you'll certainly see her in there. But I think that gives you a big part of the context of what I've been through. I've lived in California now for over half my adult life, so I'm losing the ability to do some of those voices that Robert just did, and I'm losing some of my BBC English. But my wife and I have been driving electric in California for over 20 years. I've been working in the solar and battery industry for over 20 years. So I wanted to... I was hoping today to kind of say, I told you so. Right? Like after all that time and all that struggle, my wife sat there, so, struggle, she'll probably nod her head vigorously of all the torture I put her through. But it has been a struggle. And I was thinking maybe with air, maybe this is the tipping point. And then I get the email from Robert and Dan saying, will certain large legacy auto manufacturers and not at the show. And I was in Austin when we did the show 2 years ago. I thought that was the first American toe in the water, right? And once they'd seen the enthusiasm and the crowds and packed stand for Rivian and others, that we'd broken the ice, and this would be the follow-up. I guess this is, after the 2.5-year delay, this is really
number one.
Yeah.
In many ways.
We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see how we do next time around. But that's a bit of perspective. I worked 3 years at Tesla as the technical training manager for the Powerwall 2 and the PowerPack, their energy storage products. So that gave me a real perspective on launching a new company. It was a bit like a startup within a company across the world, and seeing how attitudes change, around the world. But I don't want to hold the time.
But Brad, can you tell me, do you think it's possible to continue, in some senses, the lifestyle that I first witnessed when I first came to the United States, but using less energy more wisely? Is it possible to technologically change the way that Americans live in a good way so that they embrace it with enthusiasm rather than resist it with anger?
I think it's more of a changing of perception than the reality. I've been driving a Prius Prime, for an example, which is a plug-in hybrid. So I look at how I store and use fuel totally different than I used to.
Yeah.
I think Electrify America was up here and he said there's 800 locations that they service. throughout the United States. Well, there's 73,000 gas stations. So even though that seems like an awfully large footprint, it's not yet. So I went from driving a ICE SUV and spending $100 a week on gas. I now spend $40 a month. I usually have to buy 1 tank of gas. The rest of mine is planned, and I have a pretty small battery. I've got a 25-mile all-electric range. But the way I look at it is I can get to work, I can get home, so I charge both places. I charge on a level 1 at home because I'm in a very old house and I can't run my washer and dryer and charge my car at the same time. And then I have a level 2 at work, but that gets me around town and it virtually eliminates most of the fuel I have to burn. And I think California, I think in the last session they were talking about the text we were getting earlier in the week that turn your electric off, don't charge your vehicle. Getting enough EV charging stations to support how we charge and how we use energy consumption will be a challenge for California and for the country, but it's something we're going to have to get moving on fairly quickly because now you're starting to see a whole lot of different electric vehicles available, and it's going to double or triple over the next 2 or 3 years. So we have a lot of work to do, but it's not hard to do. It's just a matter of your perception and how you go about things.
Yeah. And Daveena, I know that you're studying and have been studying sustainability, the environment, how on earth human beings can live on this planet without, I don't want to be too crude, but pooing on it to the level that we have been for the last 250 years. I mean, can you think of ways that you can encourage people with enthusiasm and optimism to reduce their energy demands and be wiser with the way they live?
Oh, look how nice we are. Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and sort of a kind of perspective to Nick. He's been working in this industry longer than I've been alive, so relatively new to this. What I would say is...
There you go, Nick. Now you know how old you are. You've just been reminded.
Not like that. It's a complete culture shock coming here from the UK. It's an entirely different beast. Everything is bigger, and it's not just the cars and the roads and the buildings, it's the food, and everything is just supersized. But my question is, can we live like this? And is it a cultural norm now? Like, we're so acclimatized to it that to live without it would feel like we're,
stepping back in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we've got finite resources. How do we divide that, not just within this country, but globally, to make sure that everybody's equal and everybody has got enough to live and sustain themselves? I think it starts with a cultural shift, and we're very used to living in a culture where everything's instant and everything's exactly how we want it. And I mean, without being super harsh, it feels slightly gluttonous. Here, that I could have anything that I want at the touch of my fingertips, and it's maddening, isn't it? Like, that's completely crazy.
Yeah.
I think we just need to be aware of the climate crisis and the times that we're living in, and obviously the rhetoric here is quite divided between the government and the Trump era has kind of convinced us that climate change isn't happening. I think everybody in the audience is quite aware it is. How, after all that damage has been done in government, how do we now backtrack and actually say, oh no, yeah, that is happening, and we've got less than 10 years to sort it out? It's pretty tricky.
Yeah. It's a big challenge. I mean, and our generation is very much to blame. Roger, I blame you, really, for pretty much everything that's ever gone wrong.
I'd just like to point out, I'm not American, so I thought if I wore an American hat, I could at least have a sort of, the hat could have a bit of an opinion. Well, given what you've all said, I think it's the proverbial banquet of consequences we're all sitting down to now. You are in America, we are in Europe, all over the world, whether it's about climate change or a bunch of other things. I'm going to get to a nice positive bit in a minute, by the way, before everybody gets too depressed. So that banquet of consequences is realising the challenge of where does energy come from and what happens when it doesn't come from that place. We're seeing this in Europe now with gas and Russia. It's an absolute nightmare, but it was a nightmare that some people foretold, and we should have planned accordingly, and we didn't. And therefore, this stuff is befalling us right now. Yeah. And that's the case with aspects of certainly climate change and other things that are going on. So it is that banquet of consequences. But the positive bit I would like to give everybody is this. You can be either a cornucopian or a Malthusian. So Malthus believed, he was a mathematician a long time ago, that essentially over a period of time there would be so many people doing so many things. He had no idea about materialism in the modern world, but nonetheless, basically we'd eat ourselves alive and, you know, we wouldn't be here anymore. So that's maybe not the best thing to be, a Malthusian. The cornucopian thing comes from the Horn of Plenty. This is about how through our brilliance, our teamworking, the fact that we can as human beings share things, share knowledge, share ideas, pool our resources, work together, we can actually do astonishing things. When America went to the moon in the 1960s, that Rice speech from Kennedy made everybody's hair on the back of their neck stick up. Now, whether you think it was the right thing to do, if you don't mind me saying so, in terms of really defining America, that for me was everything America could and should be. It was extraordinary, and it was just showing the greatness of talents all coming together. So what I'm trying to say is, we can meet some of these challenges. We do have to reflect the fact that, you know, the banquet of consequences is upon us, but just like we've heard earlier on about, for example, where the battery in your car can end up being then an energy storage device for your home, where now certain aspects of technology are going to liberate and enable other things. You know, stationary storage won't just be great big blocks of batteries for loads of solar farms. It will be the millions and millions of electric vehicles that now are no longer dumb assets, they're smart assets, because they're helping you, like that F-150 Lightning, you know, run your house. So that's my very long answer to your very simple question.
I love it. Well, it wasn't even a question. I was just rude to you, Roger. And then look what happened.
Join the club.
Please do. Yes, please.
I was going to say, I think a big part of this is the communication aspect of it, and I want to be clear. You know, I take this cornucopian. It's a better life, right? We've electrified our house just over a year ago. Have 2 EVs, we have the solar, you know, we don't have any gas, fossil gas in the house now. It's a better life. I think communicating that to people, you know, the EV is a better vehicle. People don't go back from that. Having no emissions from the power plant that you own and control that's on your roof is a better solution. You know, having the mobile storage or stationary storage is still part of a better life. And I think part of selling it to people, we don't necessarily, I mean, I've been an educator most of my life, so I'm always trying to teach people about kilowatts and kilowatt hours and, you know, the metric, we won't go into the metric system, but, you know, talking about those simple formulae that you can use to base your decisions on this topic. But I think often it's just, this is a better product. If we get people sitting in the EV, once they've driven it, they just know it's a better product. You don't have to explain to them that, you know, this only uses 250 watt hours per mile versus your Camry that might be using 1,000, and oh, look at that, you've just saved 75% of your energy usage. And now you can run off clean electricity that you can generate and you can own and control. You know, they just buy it because it's a better solution.
Well, I think that is a critically important point. That is really important to communicate. That is that if you're suggesting to an average American to use less energy, if you're saying, "Oh, use less, have a smaller fridge, don't eat as much, have a smaller car," you may as well shut up. And if you say, "Look, why don't you have this? Because it's actually better. It's actually better. It runs better. It lasts longer. It's cheaper. You can do other things with your money other than spend it all on running that." You know, there's so many advantages to it. But communicating that is quite a complicated thing. Daveena, sorry, yeah.
I think that's so interesting. To that point, it comes down to the communication that stems from capitalism, and capitalism is, well, one of the many issues of our world, but it can be quite divisive in the sense that we're constantly hagging people to buy stuff, and so a lot of eco movements are just like, well, just stop buying stuff ever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you stop eating meat and stop doing all of these things, then the planet will be saved. And I think that's to a certain degree true, but also individuals aren't, you know, responsible for everything that's happening. We also need to put pressure, and we need more transparency from certainly governments and companies. And I think here is the perfect example of, like, yes, we can buy things within reason, we can have new technologies and new cars developed, and we're well within our rights to try them and use them and buy them, but let's be sensible about what we develop and how we sell things and why we buy things. And like Roger mentioned, make sure that the products have longevity within them, and that there's some future for reuse or recycling, and that we can do things rather than just like making a load of products and being like, yeah, it's sustainable for 5 minutes, and then like, oh, like just don't worry, we'll just greenwash it. It doesn't matter what happens then.
Yeah.
Like we need to think about the whole process, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, circular economy. I'm not completely sold on that idea, but maybe like some sort of economy that is round in some shape.
We can maybe get half a circle in the circle. I just want to quickly remind people that there is a microphone quite a long way back on this corridor of the seats if anybody wants to ask the panel a question, or maybe just have a go at us for being snot-nosed Brits that are saying use less energy to Americans. I mean, what right have we got? We haven't got exactly the most perfect society. And we've got a gentleman with a question straight away.
Okay, well, I'm Bruce from Chula Vista, and I put solar panels on my house 20 years ago. And I have 4 refrigerators, and SDG&E still owes me money at the end of each year. So I don't think we need to cut back. We've got the technology to make abundance.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, can you respond to that? Because that is an interesting aspect, that if we use technology differently, we can carry on living in a good way. It doesn't necessarily mean we haven't got to go back to the cave, basically.
To be honest with you, I don't think we're asking people to use less energy. We're asking them to use different energy.
Yeah.
And I think there's a distinction there. But I had actually talked to Bruce when he was over in our booth earlier. PLEMco not only does EV charging installations, we also do residential and commercial solar installations, microgrids, wind. So we're really a renewable energy company. And what he's talking about is a really good point. How do we accelerate that, and how do we start taking more advantage of that quicker? As an example, in California, Arizona, Nevada, I mean, you've got so much sunlight. The fact that we're still building houses that don't have solar as part of it, as a required part of it, really doesn't make sense to me. That we don't have better abilities to get solar on roofs. We do have some tax incentives, we do have things like that, but the reality is we should be much more aggressive on that. The more we can take off of the existing grid, the better off we're all going to be. And there's opportunities to do that make a lot of sense. And in Bruce's case, he's had solar on his house for 20 years. That's 20 years he's paid the exact same for energy without any additional increase in costs, like the utilities pass through. He's probably got another 5 years of useful life in his product, and then he'll have to probably replace those panels, but he'll be good for another 25 years after that. So the options and the availability of product are there to really change how we generate and consume what I would say is the same amount of energy, just in a different way.
Did you want to come back on that? Yeah.
I was going to add, I just did the math recently because we're coming up to a 10-year anniversary for our solar system, and I thought, well, I hope it doesn't happen, but if it failed tomorrow, what sort of financial deal do we get from that? We're already way cheaper. We're in Northern California, so we're already way cheaper than the retail rate that we pay for electricity for that solar. But the interesting thing is that it'll be a penny a kilowatt cheaper next year, and a penny a kilowatt cheaper again the following year.
Yeah.
And I know that, and I know I have a 25-year warranty. And I used to work for LG, who gave you a 90% performance guarantee in year 25. It's typically, more like 80 to 90% in year 25, but there aren't many products out there that'll guarantee to be still going at that level after that length of time. So, people are complaining about inflation, and it's like, not in this case.
Yeah, let's just take another question, sir.
Hello everyone, my name is Stan. I came from New Jersey. I'm representing New Jersey Electric Vehicle Association, and I have very interesting perspective about American energy consumption, because I spent 1/2 of my life in Czech Republic, born in Czech Republic, in Europe, right? And the second half here. And what I notice is that both regions, and this is not just Czech Republic, it's Europe, right? The way Europe embraces the problem with the environment is they try to be leaner. And United States, it tends to be that people tend to rely on energy, on technology to be to problem. Sorry, that United States has. So I think in the end we need both. And one striking example and Roger, you mentioned it. The war that caused the spike in energy prices in the States, at least in New Jersey where I am, people instantly knew what they have to do. They have to electrify. They have to buy electric vehicles, right? They were just hesitating, waiting for oil to go up, right? But in Czech Republic, what they do? We have to lower the price or lower the toll on roads. We have to decrease the taxation on gasoline, right? But we will not electrify. Why? Because they were never prepared. They do not have any awareness. They have nothing.
Right.
And so they depend so much on the energy that they just got vested into.
Yeah.
So, but back to the American conundrum, I think people need to understand that the energy that we pay here is substantially cheaper than anywhere else.
Oh yeah.
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 So yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So can I just say, I think in a lot of what we've heard the last couple of days, what we hear generally is, you know, we've been told we have to change, we've got to do this, there is this conundrum with, you know, the amount of energy used, but show us what the way of doing it better is.
Yeah.
You know, I think the narrative often is too simplistic. It's just not good enough to try and help people understand how am I going to do this. And everybody's daily life is about staying alive, is about having a job, is about, you know, finding food, worrying about the education of the children, your safety, all that stuff. And the trouble is then having to work it all out for yourself kind of just gets in the way. So I think we just need to find a better way of explaining how things can be better. And I think, in fairness to Elon Musk, when he does those illustrations about, well, this amount of land, if it was just solar, could power the entire United States of America, and everyone goes, really? Could it really do that? Well, yes, it could.
Yeah.
But the energy storage part of that solar proposition is the issue. It isn't that photovoltaics aren't now the cheapest they've ever been, probably going to get even more efficient, probably going to get even cheaper. But it's the storage challenge that's the issue. And I really think this almost like, if you like, the fact that the electric vehicle becomes an asset rather than liability, you know, it's like the democratization of energy storage. I think that's what we're going to see with the mass rollout of electric vehicles. As long as we get our crap together, I wasn't allowed to say the other word, because it was told off last time, get our crap together around legislation that says this is what the energy companies have to do, the OEMs have to do, the CPOs have to do, so that all aligns and comes together, rather than having the bloody mess like we've got with charging, these different systems, different plugs, different protocols. You know, let's just get a little bit of our act together and make it simple and show people what to do, rather than just telling them they're all doomed and we're all in a hell in a handcart or whatever it is.
Very true. Can we get one more question? So,
well, first off, why you're slandering all the Brits in your audience? I'm just kidding. But I guess I wanted to say, people are kind of starting to realize that less is actually more. Like, it is a better product. Like, stuff is like weighing people down. Like, there's the rise of minimalism, Marie Kondo, tiny houses, traveling with one bag, that sort of stuff. So my question is, how can we encourage manufacturers to make products that last longer, rather than this planned obsolescence model that's actually driving a lot of this waste? I think people, you know, sometimes people are buying lots of stuff just because it keeps breaking, unlike, you know, over and over again, and there's no choices to get something that lasts 25 years. There's nothing they can choose from. So how do we solve that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I just want to quickly say is there's a company in the UK that has been struggling for years. I don't know if they'll ever make it. They're called River Simple. It's actually a hydrogen fuel cell car, but they never intended to sell them. They were never made for people to buy. They were made for people to use. And their whole ethos, and I question the wisdom of using hydrogen fuel cells, but I absolutely agree with the basic business premise. They're building a car that will last as long as possible because it's profitable to the company for that car to last 100 years. The longer it lasts, the more they can rent it. And when you see that model, you go, well, that makes, they don't want it to break down because they don't want to buy a new one. They don't want to make a new one. They want that one to last as long. So the whole thing has been built around the maximum life they can possibly squeeze out of this machine with the minimum amount of maintenance and attention. And it will never be owned. No one's ever going to buy that car, but their ideas, they'd be ubiquitous, and you'd be able to use it whenever you needed to, and you wouldn't have the responsibility of the ownership, but you'd have the benefit of the use. And that, it's a fascinating model. It hasn't worked yet. and there's a guy called Hugo Spears who's been trying to do this for 10 plus years, and he's an amazing guy, and I think he's barking mad because of hydrogen fuel cells, but everything else he's doing is truly inspirational. And that is a kind of model that can fit within a free market capitalist economy, but it's just flipping it on its head. And it's those things that I'm really hopeful will start to emerge in the next few years as the next generation come in and go, I don't want to make a thing that lasts 10 years and it falls apart and you throw it away. Let's work a way of finding a way around that. I think is critically important, but
And I think that kind of transition to more of a circular economy is sort of locked into this approach. You stop burning something and kiss it goodbye in a one-off transaction with the environment with bad consequences. Instead, all the materials are still in the battery after the 10 years or so, or the solar panel. It doesn't just stop on 25 years and one day. It's down to 90 or 80%, like I said before, and maybe it's going to be 70% in a few years.
Still works.
It's still working, and it might still cover your usage, but when it's done, you take those raw materials out, they come around again. So it is part of that change in mindset. It might not be less, I think, go back to Roger's point, you can use more, you put in more panels, you can use more clean, renewable energy. That's why I think it's crucial not to convey to the outside audience that this is about sacrifice and moving back into the cage and hair shirt and all that. That's why it's not. It's a better life. Look at us happy people with our EVs and solar out there.
We're just coming up to we're kind of running out. But great question, so thank you. And Brits they rock. Well, no, they rock and then apologise. Yeah, we rock, but we're ever so sorry. Yes, sir, we've got time for one more question, yes.
Thanks so much. From all your different expertises, when do you think it's a realistic solution to see real change for the middle class?
Come a bit closer to the mic, sorry, can't quite hear you.
From all your different areas of expertise, when do you think the time frame is for real solutions for the middle class? I drive electric cars, I have solar on my roof, but I had the money to do it. When are electric cars, solar storage going to be real common solutions for people who just aren't rich?
Yeah.
Right?
Critically important question, yeah.
Well, I think we had a panel yesterday, and Corey from Monroe was talking about cost down in the electric vehicle proposition, cost down in terms of weight, cost down in terms of, improvement in terms of efficiency, and so we have to go in that way, but we also have to learn how to share things better. And there are examples around the world where, for example, solar energy, that people lucky enough to have a roof can actually produce it, but then part of the deal is to share it then with the community. Yeah. I think there's a really good one, I can't remember the name, in Australia that does that. There's a lot of community solar in some of these countries, so it isn't necessarily about making it so affordable that every person can buy it, because the reality is that's probably never going to happen. But finding models in which we can share things better, I think that's what we have to do. If we all share the planet, it stands to reason we can all share some of the benefits that we get from it if we're lucky enough to have, some of these nice things.
Yeah. And Brad, one of the things you were saying about the new buildings, I mean, when I see new buildings, we have exactly the same thing in the UK. There's loads of new houses being built. None of them have solar panels on the roof. Solar does work in the UK. I've got solar, it makes a big difference. And it's so frustrating. And the fact that that happens in a state that is incredibly sunny, that can affect people from all income levels. If they live in a building, it can have solar on the roof and they can benefit from it.
I agree, and you're making a valid point. EVs are generally very expensive right now. But I think you'll see models come out over the next 2 to 3 years, even especially next year, that are going to be in a much different price range. The FinTech vehicles you see out there, they actually have 5 models. I think they're bringing 2 in this year, the other 3 next year. That's a pretty good size SUV, EV, that has a very affordable price point. Some of the other vehicles, like the Ford Maverick, which is a hybrid truck, hopefully that'll come out in a plug-in version. I think that you're going to have to see hybrid plug-in, and EV, the combination of all three over the next 2 to 5 years, so that everybody can start to reduce fuel consumption. Everyone who can't afford an EV can absolutely afford a hybrid plug-in. You know, the Prius Prime that I'm driving, and I can drive what I want, I mean, it's like $35,000. So that's really affordable. The RAV4 is really affordable. There are alternatives to the hybrid plug-ins, and I think eventually the EVs, the trucks, the work trucks, those types of things, they're coming. They're just not quite out yet, but to be honest with you, since I do EV charging infrastructure, the infrastructure is not there yet either. So I think we're going to have to rely on all three of those things initially to be able to start making major reductions.
I was going to say that one of the beauties of solar is that it's modular. And when we did the Austin show, I actually had a full-size, a real solar panel on the stage. It was a 375 watt module, and that would produce basically 2,000 miles of driving every year. The electricity from that one module, that solar panel, was enough to power your typical EV 2,000 miles a year, just one, right? So, you know, you don't have to spend the $25,000 that people always mention for the solar system. You can buy 1 or 2 or 4, add another 4 later, build your system bit by bit. It's not that huge initial expense that people sometimes talk about. You can build the system bit by bit, so it is more accessible. And then there's financing, right? There's finance out there, no money down, and you benefit from day one. So I don't buy that that's necessarily a barrier.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I think one of the aspects that we're just seeing emerge in the UK is the second-hand market, the third-hand EV market, which makes that initial step into using EVs slightly more affordable for more people. I mean, it's certainly, you know, that is starting to happen. And I think in the next, say, 5 years, we're certainly in the UK going to see hundreds of thousands of cars coming onto the second-hand market, which is, the prices may go up because there's so much demand for it, but they're going to be available, whereas up to now, they've barely been any around, you know. So we are now well over time. I'm very sorry if you were going to ask a question, I do apologise, but I think we've got to round up because we've got another panel starting immediately. Yes, I'm getting a very clear nod. So don't go away, don't touch that dial, but please give a big warm round of applause to our fantastic panel, and thank you very much.